Hello, hello. I'm so happy today to have Ciara Lamia and Beau Whitney join us. Ciara is the director of supply chain at Burgerville, and Beau Whitney is a supplier to Burgerville, with being the CEO of Everyday Hemp, which is a bio based cutlery and straw supplier. So, this is going to be a very interesting interaction, and I'm so excited about this because we are getting at it from both angles, right? We don't get to interview so many customers, final customers, in our show. And of course, Bo, you are one of us trying to make a change in this world. So thank you both for joining in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to be here.
Great. So I'm going to start at with Burgerville. And Sierra, maybe you can take this one up. Way back about in what we read in 2003, the Gourmet magazine said that it is the freshest fast food in the country. So, can you talk a little bit more about that whole ethos of serving fast food, but yet being fresh? And of course, we'll get into the sustainable side later.
Yeah, of course. So Burgerville, we started in 1961, so we've been a Pacific Northwest food destination, I would say, for quite a few years. We've always tried to really source locally. That's always been, for at least 50 years, that's kind of been one of our guiding principles, is really having the best people, having the best partners, having best local products, best local ingredients, and really looking at what's in the Pacific Northwest, as far as regional farmers and ranchers, um, and that kind of, like, we've always felt that kind of ties right in directly with quality. I would say, especially over the last few years, where a lot of supply chains were impacted by the pandemic, it became really evident to us that local really is key because we were fortunate enough to maintain supplies and really not have a tremendous amount of supply chain disruption. So we were very fortunate. And I really do think that was directly correlated to the local aspect of our food. So it doesn't travel very far. We work with small local suppliers. We work with bigger suppliers as well, but it really stays here in the region. So it doesn't go very far. There's oftentimes, when we do our local Yakima Valley asparagus, it'll be pretty much picked the day before it'll get into distribution and into the restaurant. So it is fresh. We That's really how we like it. So that's kind of our guiding principles for quality. And then our chef, she and our food team, really, we've got a lot of tenure here at Burgerville, but we've got a great team that really looks at food from, what are those local ingredients that we can really capitalize on, those local flavors. Really, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you get it, you know what I'm talking about. So that's kind of how we look at quality.
Yeah, we were just visiting some friends this morning, in fact, and they gave me a huge bag of kale. They're like, "This is growing so much, and this is the time." So I know exactly what you're
Yep.
talking about. But a little bit more on that. How did that whole ethos come about? Was it from the founders? Was it, how did this whole idea that it's a fast food chain, but we're going to be fresh and we're going to be local? Do you know how that whole idea transpired?
I do. So our founders, we were originally kind of founded as an ice cream shop that kind of evolved over time with comfort foods, and it became a fast food chain at a certain point. And it was really like the marketplace has a lot of restaurants, a lot of like concepts. How can we differentiate ourselves and really capitalize on, flavorful things that are in season, really support community. And I think it really started with our beef. That was kind of, I think, the gateway into a lot of our attributes of our products. And it was really looking at, we partner with Country Natural Beef. They're a local co-op of ranchers in the Pacific Northwest. And at the time, I think it was, I want to say 2004, 2005, the conversation was pretty early. They had just they had a certain amount of ranchers on board, really couldn't supply our volume. But we started those conversations early about, like, how can we really differentiate ourselves? And beef was kind of the first step in that, with the practices and the way that they ranch, the way that they really nurture the land. It's not so much a commodity program. It's not anywhere close to a commodity program. It's really, the cattle are thoughtfully raised, humanely processed. So I mean, it's really a much different program than you would typically see in a restaurant. And we were really excited to talk about it and share that with our guests. So I think Burgerville was really, it was a differentiator, but it was also really early, because now you kind of see that a lot of places where they've got high attribute products, high attribute ingredients. So Burgerville was definitely early in that space, and we've really taken it on, and I think we've really expanded that to 75% of our products are now locally sourced. So we're really proud to say that. Like our beef is no antibiotics ever, humanely raised, and they're also, that co-op is getting into regenerative agriculture, and it's just a lot of the programs that we've started over the years have really developed, and they've just gone to a whole new level where we started versus where we're at now.
Yeah, and I'm going to stay with that a little bit, Bo. I know that I'm keeping you waiting, but but just on that note, Sierra, you said like 72% or 75% from local landing. That's literally like less than 500 miles from your locations. But you also have this whole idea of recycling, and you have another one of being based out of renewable energy, and another one of land stewardship, which is 100% kind of wind power. So can you throw light on that as well? And why is that important as a fast food chain? You're providing convenient food in the end, and why does all this become important as a company?
Sure, it's really like we want to have high quality food, high quality ingredients, and just deliver them in a certain way in which guests can get them quickly. So it's really, it doesn't have to be either or. We see it as a both and. Like, we want to have local ingredients, we want to have ingredients that support community in the Pacific Northwest, and we just want to deliver them in a really hot, delicious way quickly for our guests. So we see it as like, it's a tall order, but we've taken it on. And I would say, again, going back to the beef, we've partnered with Carmen Ranch, who is Regenified certified, and I know Country Natural is also looking at their own kind of certification model, and really taking on, like, they are stewards of the land. A lot of our suppliers, they really take on, like, I'm a steward of my community, of the soil, of water use, really like responsible and thoughtful resource management from, the beginning to the end, from the time that it starts with them until the time that it gets to the restaurant. So I mean, in the aspect of packaging, I would say it's been challenging for us. I would say I've been with Burgerville for 8 years, and I've been working on packaging for 8 years. So it's definitely one of those things where, once you get really immersed in it and you're really sourcing it, you find out that there's just so many different aspects of, like, the recycling, the composting, um, the function, the cost. It's a lot to take in, and you really find out quickly that the industry it has what it has. So and Burgerville was one of the early adopters. They had a completely compostable program. Um, Back in March 2011, they were looking and having studies done on their carbon footprint. So Burgerville was really a very, again, early to the conversation as far as sustainability. And it's definitely been a process. You find out quickly that the industry doesn't have a lot of options. I think it's getting better. When we found Everyday Hemp, I was so excited. His straws and his future products. We're hoping to talk to him about cutlery. Um, just wonderful, wonderful things, attributes that we love to have, and we're trying to carry that through in the rest of our packaging. It's been a little difficult. Bo's really an innovator in that space, but we're getting there.
And that's a great place to bring Bo in. Thank you for lining that up, Sierra. So,
Of
Bo,
course.
let's talk about you and how this whole idea of providing these cutlery choices and straw choices evolved for you. And then, of course, how did you find that Burgerville will be an early adopter for you? So let's hear the story.
Well, I do a lot of economic research, and I've been providing inputs on sustainability and practices and showing the value from an economics perspective. And so I've been working on the policy side under my other brand under Whitney Economics. And when I started looking into the hemp industry, I was like, wow, there's a lot more to this than people are giving it credit for. And I was at and but what I realized is that you could do hemp for electronic vehicle batteries to run cars. You can do hemp as a semiconductor, and 20% of Mercedes right now, their parts are made from hemp. 20%, right? And so you have a lot of this of these traditional industries using hemp as a sustainable part. But what I couldn't get people to relate to is just the commonality of hemp. And so I went to I'll never forget this. I wanted to develop a product that people could relate to that was everyday in nature. And so I looked at the cutlery side of things. Well, I was at a conference, and there was the hemp regulator for Kentucky, right? A big hemp producer. And she said that there was no economically viable product other than CBD that was made from hemp. And so I talked to her after her panel, and I had a hemp based spoon. And so I kind of fumbled around saying I wanted to talk to her and give her my card. And I said, here, can you hold this, while I get my card, And so it was like, I was like, here, can you hold this? And so she held on to that. She goes, "Oh, what is this?" And I said, "Well, that's one of those non-economically viable products that you just." And so then we started talking about, capabilities, and these are home compostable and biodegradable, and so there was an interaction there, but it takes education. And so that's why I value, podcasts like this, is that it provides education to people. Um, and so then, as we looked into the sustainable practices and the amount of microplastics in the environment right now, we started looking into this, and we jumped in full bore, and then we diversified. Not only doing hemp products, but then doing maize and corn based products. And so one of the appeals, and I've been a fan of Burgerville, consumer of Burgerville products for a long time. I mean, like most of my life, right? And and so I knew that they were very, very supportive of local businesses, and they had these sustainable practices. And so once I saw that and was able to make the connection between my company, Everyday Hemp Company, and Burgerville, then we started the discussions, and my cutlery wasn't quite ready. I had a first gen part, and I wasn't confident enough to deploy this into mass production, and so we pivoted over to the maize based straws. And we can do like 40 million a month of these straws, right? So it just seemed like a natural fit. And once we started talking, and once we provided some samples over, then Burgerville was gracious enough to give us an opportunity. And it's just been a match made in heaven. It's been great. And so that we're aligned in terms of philosophy for business and practices, and we're supportive. I feel like I'm part of a team, and they've been very supportive of the team. And so it's just been really, really good to work with Burgerville, on this project.
That's amazing. And what really struck me that when you started, you talked about economics and cost. And I think it's for both of you because you both are on the kind of the other side of the table. And it's interesting because for me, cost is always kind of in comparison, right? What is the current substrate, and how much are we going to increase our cost by sourcing something else? Because in isolation, it doesn't mean anything, right? Whether it's expensive or cheap, it's just in comparison. So, how did you kind of compare to the substrates that Burgerville was using, and especially in the maize straw kind of domain? And Sierra, from your perspective, how were you able to make that decision that I'm going to, if it was a little more expensive, I'm going to adopt this no matter what. So maybe Bo, you start with, how did you position that cost side of it, and then we'll go to Ciara.
Well, I not only look at the cost of the product individually, but I look at the overall cost, the macro costs. And every day there's over 500 million petroleum based straws used and thrown away in landfills every day. 500 million a day. And so there's a cost associated with that. You're starting to see microplastics show up in the human genetics, the human genome. You're starting to see it in the air, the land, the water. And so these pollutants, they need to be addressed. And so there's a cost associated with that. But what we've done is we've been able to, my background is high tech supply chain. I used to work for Intel Corporation and TriQuint Semiconductor, right? So I know about supply chain and how to run those and how to iron out the cost, or really wring out the costs in the supply chain. So what we tried to do is we tried to get ramped up into volume as quickly as possible so that we had economies of scale. And then from the economies of scale, then we became closer to converging towards the price of the petroleum products.
Ciara?
I think it was there was definitely a lot of conversation with Bo. He was very gracious in going back and forth regarding pricing. I think really for Burgerville, it was some of our restaurants are in a county in Portland where there's a single use plastics ban. So for us, it was really like, how can we offer a product to our guests that still functions the way they need and expect it to, while ticking those sustainability boxes. We did try early on paper straws. um, it was it was rough. It was rough. Yes, we're not happy with those. They don't feel the same. They don't function the same. So it was really like, how can we get a product that will function and have those sustainability attributes? And Bo, I don't remember how we got connected, but we found each other, and it was just like, wow, this sounds like it's just perfect. So we did know that his pricing was actually comparable to what we were paying for petroleum-based straws. I mean, it's a little bit more, but it's not so much more that we weren't willing to take that on. Also, just to have those, it's a non-monetary benefit, but to have a straw that satisfies that single-use plastics ban in Portland was huge. Just operationally, to have our restaurants feel like I can offer this product to guests and I'm not going to get a hand slap because I'm in violation of this policy. So I think for us, there was an operational efficiency and the cost worked out. So it was natural.
Was there any? Go
There's
ahead.
another aspect to this um, is that consumers now, there's a shift in the demographics of the consumer, and there's a shift in the value proposition by the consumers, and they will actually determine if they want to shop with a particular company based upon their sustainability and environmental practices. And so
Absolutely.
there's this led to an appeal by this demographic to do more business and shift over their consumer purchasing patterns over to sustainable products. And so we fit right in well with that. And then a lot of the demographics, the younger demographics, they're even willing to pay a premium. Now, we're not trying to take advantage of that willingness to pay a premium. We're trying to drive parity with petroleum based products. But given that flexibility and given the consumer preference, and given the demographics of the consumers and the clients at Burgerville services, I mean, it was right there, And so we just had to make sure that we were reliable and consistent and met the expectations of our client, that being Burgerville.
And Sierra, in terms of the performance, you mentioned that, of course, paper was a disaster, and I've heard that from numerous companies and people, even manufacturers, who kind of went the paper route and then took something else. But if you compare a maize-based straw to a a petroleum-based straw. Do you see any difference, or there's no significant difference to be worried about?
Uh, it's amazing how there's no difference really. And Bo just actually showed me a straw that they're working on with a different material that is, I think, Bo, if you want to talk about it, that would be probably better than me talking about it since it's so new. But it's reusable up to 99 times in the dishwasher. So when you look at it, it actually does it functions like a like a straw that any guest would expect, and it looks really substantial. So it like when you look at it, it looks like a reusable straw. Like, hey, I would want to throw this in the dishwasher and reuse it. Not like some straws that they're still rather flimsy, and it's like I don't understand how I could reuse this again. This is, I got to throw this away. But it does as far as function, there's no difference. I think guests have been really really happy with the performance of the straws. And just to add to what Bo was saying a moment ago, um our restaurants are in a lot of jurisdictions. We're in a lot of different counties, and all the legislation varies by where we're at. So some have home composting, some don't, some have recycling. It can vary quite a bit. So this product with all the attributes and the wonderful things that it has really allows us to cater to more of those guests, to really capture more of those home composters, or those folks that do have a commercial composting program. So it's been really, I would say, from functionality, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, Bo, you can go ahead with the other straw which you're developing. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see this very well.
Yeah, I
This is
can.
what it looks like. And so, people say that the consumers say that it has the same look and feel as a traditional petroleum-based plastic, and they want that, right? And with the paper straws, we found that well, it's great that people are looking at alternative technologies and the like, and alternative product offerings. The consumer experience just wasn't there, and there was also some chemical issues associated with the production of the paper that are can be problematic. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to offer a product that consumers valued and liked. With respect to the dishwasher, and in some jurisdictions, like in Canada, you can, if you can prove that there's a multiple use, then there's flexibility in these single use bans. And so, what I had my contract manufacturer go through and really test and put these through the rigors. And so, in order to get the Canadian certification, we had to run this through a dishwasher 100 cycles, and it held up. But then, once you put it into a compostable environment, um, then it biodegrades. And so it was really the best of both worlds, the reuse and the biodegradability. And it's also marine degradable. And so, we were concerned about these getting into waterways and like, and as a result of that, with the different ingredients and recipes that we have, we've met that barrier. And those are certifications that have been issued, internationally. So we meet international standards, and so those can be tough standards to meet. Um, but in doing so and driving the technology and the products towards that, then we're doing good things, right? We're helping the environment. We're providing opportunities for farmers. We're providing opportunities for product manufacturers. We're addressing microplastics. I mean, there's just so many benefits. And so we're quite proud that we've tried to take the lead, on these types of technologies and deployments of products.
That's truly wonderful. And what is keeping you from the cutlery? Because it seems like you're onto a great path and track. So, what is it? Is it technology? Is it the production? And of course, Burgerville's adaptation. So, at present, Sierra, I presume, are you using traditional cutlery from petroleum, and that's the switch that you're trying to make, or are you replacing another bio-based substance with what Bo is creating?
That's what you said is correct. We're currently using a petroleum. based, but we're waiting on Beau for the go ahead to move over to his cutlery.
So what has been the limiting factor is um, I want a product that people feel just the same as they do with the straws, that it's a comparable substitute to petroleum products. And so a lot of this comes down to the design. And it's not the ingredients that go into the manufacturing, it's the design itself. And so I've been trying to contract internationally for these molds in the injection molding process. It's a plastic process. And I just haven't been able to find a mold supplier that actually had some legitimacy. And so I kept on working with one and then the next and the next internationally, and it just wasn't happening. And so then I just kind of gave up and pivoted over towards straws. And then now that the straws are well in hand, now we're pivoting back. So I'm looking at a US based manufacturer right now, manufacturer of the molds. And we're going to finalize the design on Monday. And so I'm really excited about that. And then there's a little bit of development of the molds. You have to build them, and then we'll be able to do high volume manufacturing out of the get go from, once the molds are in house. And so we're setting a goal of 100 million cutlery per year. That's just at a minimum because there's 100 million, similar to how there's 500 million straws used and thrown in landfills every day. There's 100 million cutlery used and thrown away in landfills. And so I want to replace at least one day's worth of supply. And if I can do one day, I can do a week, I can do a month, right? And so, but you have to start somewhere. And so it's the time to market has been the issue, and it's been mainly at the manufacturing level. It hasn't been at the material supply level. Um, and so we're lining up the raw material supply line, contracting uh, hemp providers all over the country. And so, because we've got enough volume now to where it can't just be supplied in Oregon, Oregon kind of has, because of the hyper focus on cannabinoids, they're less inclined to support hemp industries. And so, as a result of that, we've had to go to other jurisdictions, other states to get our supply. So, Montana's a big supplier. Missouri is looking pretty good right now. Wisconsin and Michigan, and so in Colorado, and so those have been the focus of our raw material supply in addition to Oregon.
Oh, that's great. And are all the straws manufactured locally as well?
Our straws are currently manufactured in the Midwest, um, because we have a very strong contract manufacturer that we've been working with historically. And then we do have designs at some point to bring that manufacturing capability into Oregon. Um, and on the cutlery, though, it's our intention to bring that into Oregon, and we've conveyed that for a long time now to Burgerville. It's like, but we're based out of Portland, Oregon, so we're a local company, and we support the local businesses as well.
Superb. So, Sierra, I want to go back to what you said earlier. Back in 2011, you guys started this whole compostable program. I want to learn more about what that was, how far you got, and what the challenges were. Maybe starting from the intention, and then how you went about it, and what the challenges were in order to be able to, go ahead in the future towards that.
I've heard from some of the folks that have been here, the story of it. I wasn't here for it. It's really, I think, Burgerville embracing the sustainability initiative. Again, wanting to be one of those early adopters, looking at we know we need packaging. We're a restaurant. A lot of our meals are eaten off premise. They're not eaten in restaurants anymore. So how can we still be sustainable while making sure that our guests have what they need? So I think it was the thought at the time anyway was if we put together a compostable program for all of our single use packaging, we can have, at the time it was a hauler up in the Seattle area. We can have them pick it up and compost it. It'll be a solid program. Some of the challenges that I have been told at the time existed, and I think they probably still do to a certain extent, is really just the the quality of the material that was getting shipped up to be composted. It was really there was a lot of other things that were getting hauled in there, and it made it really difficult for the composter at the time to really do what they needed to do. I think at the time they decided like, hey, we're not going to take anything from Portland, and and Bo can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that there has been another composter down here. I think the composter up north has started to open those programs again where they're willing to take in packaging. I think it's pretty strict on like, hey, it really has to be packaging, can't have food and other materials that are not compostable in there. So it was really the quality of the materials that were going up there. And I suspect that it would still be challenging to this day. I think there's a couple of smaller composters in the area, but again, I think they really only pick up from either the home or if they are commercial, they're pretty small and localized. So it's in Burgerville's looking at packaging for the last 8 years. It's really the question has been multiple times, do we look at a more of a recycling program? Do we look at more of a composting program? Do we have a mix of both? Um, and I know when we've looked at composting, packaging, compostable packaging, it's really there's an additional cost, and it's for us, it's been kind of a challenge because we can't really ensure that those things, if they're compostable, that they're getting to a composting facility. And then I think it really is like that education piece because we are in so many different jurisdictions. We're in Oregon and in Washington, lots of different counties, lots of different regulations. It's how do you tell a guest in Corvallis what they need to do with their packaging when they're done versus maybe up in Centralia, Washington. Are they the same? Are they different? So I think the education piece has been really it's been challenging. I think for quite a while. So the I think there's some messaging that we've tried to do, but it really relates to like single use, like, hey, we're not going to automatically give you X, Y, and Z, you'll have to request it. Unless it's like something where it's like, it's a salad, of course you're going to need a fork. We'll try to obviously give them what they need, but yeah, those are some of the challenges that we found. And I think, like I said, it's even to this day where there's a lot of recycling versus composting as far as packaging goes. And for us, I think it's been, what's the lesser evil, knowing that, there's still a lot of gaps and it's very fragmented. So what is that sustainable packaging program that we could put together that would check as many of those boxes? Kind of like I was talking about earlier with the straws, knowing that we're kind of spread out over Oregon and Washington. So
It's Burgerville has been ahead of the curve on this by driving the um, the recycling and the biodegradability as close to the home as possible. Right now, the state legislatures are more of the mindset of industrial compostability. And although that's a step in the right direction, it's not where we ultimately want to be. And so the industrial compostability requires a hauler to sort the materials and then send it, once it's sorted, then send it to an industrial compost or commercial composting facility. And then from there, then it goes through heat and biodegradable process, right? And but there's challenges even in the sorting of the material to direct it to the industrial compost centers. And so what we've done as a company is we've tried to support industrial compostability, but then also try to take it the next step down to the home compostability and the marine compostability. And so there's still challenges in this, but right now there's really no standards for what does home compostability mean, and then how do you educate the consumer? And then if you looked at this straw, is it petroleum, is it industrial, or is it home? And so it's really there's not a whole lot of intuitive senses just on the optics, but then you have to educate the consumers and the restaurants and the businesses about how to go about the process of dealing with this from a compostability and a renewable perspective.
Yeah, and
We've
sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to add that we, as Burgerville, we have investigated some reusable programs, as I think a lot of folks would say, like, oh, well, if you don't have a strong recycling or composting program, then what about reusables? And there's a lot of concepts that do reusables, and they do them pretty well. Um, I think for Burgerville over the years, it's been difficult. We've looked at several different programs where it's almost like a checkout system where you have a subscription, you use a box, you bring it in, we would fill it, and then you'd bring the used box back for cleaning, and it would be reusable. Um, there's there's a lot of food safety things that we have to think about as well. So the reusable part is something that we've looked at pretty in depth, and we've just found that for our concept with at least 75 to 80% of our guests eating their meals off premise, they're not eating in our restaurants. It's just difficult from a food safety aspect. So that's kind of the other thing that we've been taking into consideration when putting a packaging program together.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned before that I'm really surprised, with the composting services and Bo added to it. I would, from a standpoint of a consumer, I would assume that all the food waste and the packaging waste can be composted together rather than segregating it. Because of course, as soon as you segregate it, there's a bigger challenge, right? Ideally,
Right.
you want one trash can that has both the food and all your packaging waste, and it goes into compost. So, and that you say is a challenge for the composters. So do you know why that is? Why not just dump the food and the packaging in one and call it good? Everything goes into compost, and that's it.
Well, part of it has to do with how quickly a lot of these materials break down. Food breaks down a lot quicker. Home compostable products break down a lot quicker. But if you commingle with, say, industrial compostable products and like, then it takes a lot longer. And so you can get there in the, in through the industrial process. Oh, here's my cat that just decided.
She
um,
wants to be part of the podcast. Come on, Bo. Let her be.
but on the industrial side, it can take a little bit longer in the natural environment than a food product would. And so, but by getting it into the industrial compost center, then you can reduce that cycle time to get it to the biodegraded state. And so that's the thing, is like, ideally, if you shifted the entire industry over to a home compostable, biodegradable product packaging and cutlery and the like, then you could commingle it. But when I was in discussions, in some conversations with the city of Portland, Oregon, for example, they were like, "Well, we're happy that even if it's recycled or thrown into the landfill, we're happy that your product is biodegradable and home compostable, because it just it degrades even in that landfill environment, right?" And so and the less harm that we can do to the environment, the better, right? So there's nuances on the timing and the cycle time in terms of it being fully compostable and biodegraded.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. So, Sierra, when I look at various companies that are considered to be a little conscious like you, I'll take the name of Chipotle or Sweet Green. They use a lot of molded fiber. And of course, one of the challenges I see with the molded fiber is, and I've talked to numerous burger companies as well, being a sustainable packaging provider ourselves. And one of the challenges that they mention is of cost, of course, but the other one they mention is also branding. And I love to hear from you what keeps you from going to something like molded fiber, which is home compostable, as Bo was talking about, and really sustainable, normally made from agri residue, like again the products that Bo is talking about. I'm sure you would have considered that, and with the kind of outlook Burgerville has, would love to hear what your thoughts are on something like that.
I would say, yeah, we've looked at molded fiber. I think for our application, we use a lot of wraps, which are, I would say, our packaging is overall is pretty minimal. We've upgraded some items in just the last 6 months that are a little bit more substantial, but it's pretty minimal. So we use a wrap, which is probably considerably less material than maybe those molded fiber packages are, and it really just makes sense. The quality of the product is still there. Once you The way we wrap the burgers and the sandwiches actually traps some of the heat and it steams the bun, so it actually helps hold some of that heat, helps actually increase the eating experience, adding to that quality. So I think for us, the we haven't, like, I don't guess I'm thinking molded fiber doesn't really fit what we would need from a function standpoint. Certainly, it makes sense. We've looked at it. We've looked at like the clamshell boxes. Like, what if we put our burgers in a clamshell box, like some other concepts do? But really, it's just like the function works well of the wraps. Our burgers are hand wrapped. It works well, and it it really is, I guess, a minimalist approach, but it still really works and functions. So I think that's kind of where we've been. The molded fibers are definitely, it's crazy how much um, more responsible packaging can cost. You would think you would be incentivized to use products that are better for the environment, but they are actually quite a bit more expensive, is what we've found over the years. And again, it's that guest, I think, communication piece of like, if I get, a molded fiber container, but then I get a wrap and then I get a cup, it's still that guest education piece of, what goes where. And can I put it in my home compost, or can I put it into, if Burgerville had, back when we had the composting program, do I put it in the bin at Burgerville? Will it get where it needs to go? So I think it's still that guest education piece, but we just haven't had we haven't seen a need to use molded fiber. It just isn't really, there's not really a good place for it to fit in our operations, at least at this point. But our menu is always adding and developing. So
You mentioned costing. So when you look at cost side, which is also so important because ultimately you are competing in a marketplace, and how do you consider packaging? I've heard numerous percentages, like 5 to 6% of the total cost. And where would you park that? And what would your comfort level be? That this is my total. This is my ultimately, in a way packaging is a necessary evil for you. It's not what you're
right,
trying to do, right? In the end, you're trying to serve food, and yes, it has to go on to something. And I love that idea that you mentioned right now of a minimalistic approach, because I think the best packaging is no packaging. Right? Serve the fresh
right.
food and call it good. But when you think about the cost, that this is the quantum of the total revenue that can be packaging. How do you look at the costing side of it?
I would say we just take a look at where we've been over the last 5-6 years. I would say things have changed drastically over the last few years since the pandemic, which is another reason that we try to source domestically whenever possible, try to avoid those longer lead times and over the water freight lanes get booked up and containers. That's a whole other conversation. But um, just trying to source domestically, trying to source local as much as possible. Really looking at the I guess I would say, like, we know that there's a cost to packaging, and it really is just it's going to serve the food, and then it's going to go right into some kind of waste receptacle. So we've got an idea of where we need to be financially, but I think what's really taken precedence is just the sustainability component of it and the function of it. Um, I think Burgerville's packaging program it's been pretty it hasn't changed a lot, I would say, over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, since we had the total composting program. So I would say, like, we feel like it works. There's a lot of considerations, like the wraps that we have. They fit into the restaurant, into the kitchen. They're set up. There's holders. So if we were going to go to a molded fiber or a clamshell, it's like, how do you store those on the line so that the cooks can grab what they need, and it's easily accessible. Same thing with, like, fry packaging is another thing that we've been looking at. It's very minimalist right now. We've been looking at, like, well, do you get a box, a fry box, something that's a little bit more upgraded, but then again, where do you put it? So I think it's about the sustainability piece as much as it is about the function and the guest experience. Um, I think those are two of the things that probably trump the pricing. I mean, don't get me wrong, pricing is of course important, but we're willing to take a little bit of a increase in price if we know, like, hey, this is going to increase our speed of service, or this is going to really function better for the guest. Because as I mentioned before, you've got 75 to 80% of guests that are taking their meal through a drive-through or through a delivery service, and it's really about, like, how can that meal go from the kitchen, prepared hot and fresh, and be transported in such a way that it stays hot, it stays good quality. And when that guest finally gets their meal or they get to their destination and they're able to eat it, it really is the best eating experience. It's to your point earlier about quality. It maintains that quality and integrity. So I think it's been I would say it's been a delicate balance because when you increase the functionality of certain packaging items, it seems like the cost goes up as well. But I think we found a good balance where we know we don't have the most inexpensive packaging, but we love the attributes that it has. We're always looking at for what's new. I think innovation and creativity in that space is something that we're always interested in talking about. Um, and something that we continue to look at. I think our packaging program is never going to be static. It's always going to be evolving. It's always going to be adapting, especially with companies like Beau, where he's got cutlery. I mean, we're using the petroleum-based cutlery right now, and that it really came as a necessity out of the pandemic, where we need to have single-use cutlery, and we have to have them wrapped so that way there's no potential contamination. So, working with Beau on, like, here's something that will function for the guests, but there's also that sustainability piece in a much bigger way. I think it really is. There's a value proposition there for us.
From a supply chain perspective, and having a background in this, I always find this really fascinating. When you look at the economics of things, especially post pandemic, you've had higher input costs across the board, and so you've got now increases in labor in addition to your increased raw material input costs, your packaging material costs, and the like. And so what we try to focus in on is keeping our costs down as much as possible so that we don't contribute to that overall pricing inflation. Demand in these restaurants, in as well as in other industries, there's a certain elasticity to this, meaning pricing sensitivity by the consumer. And so there's only so much you can pass along to the consumer before they start chafing. And so, as a result of that, if we feel that as partners, as teammates to Burgerville, if we can do our part to keep our costs down, then it gives them greater flexibility to adjust their pricing and cost structure in other areas. So we try to be, don't worry about us. We've got you covered. And then, focus on other things. And I think to a major extent, that's been working. It's been working and it's been a good partnership so far.
And that's probably music to Sierra's ears, right? Like this is not an important thing for me. I would rather focus on the raw material for the food, and Bo is there to take care of this, and call it good. It's even if it is a differential of a little bit, it makes sense that okay, let me park this aside and focus on what is more important. I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday with Howard Schultz, the Starbucks founder, and it was so interesting, and what you were saying, Sierra, earlier was echoing that the customer experience, and that is important, and you don't want to compromise on that. And I want to
Right.
take a cue from what Bo was saying earlier and ask you about this idea that customers and consumers are becoming more conscious about sustainability, and that's been the general trend. How much do you actually hear of that? One is that, okay, I could be talking to my mate and saying that, oh, I wish Burgerville did this better. The other is the Burgerville getting that feedback and how important that is to the consumer. And, like, what is that? Is there a voice of customer mechanism that you have where you can capture that thought and then implement it in your own way? How does that work? And then, of course, I would love to hear, Bo, your point on how that is changing the restaurants overall. But Sierra, please go ahead.
Yeah, as Burgerville, I think we've done a lot of market research. So we have a good sense of where other concepts are in that space as far as sustainability. Um, we're not trying to keep up with anybody. I think Burgerville has always tried to forge its own path and really be um, sustainable. I think local, fresh, sustainable has been the kind of the tag for many, many years. So Burgerville's always tried to take on sustainability, whether it's in its own way or it's more in a mainstream way. It's always tried to take on sustainability. So I would say guest feedback. It feels like sometimes you only hear when something's wrong, but we always listen to guest feedback. We take it as guest gifts. They're giving us their feedback, and it only makes us better. I don't think packaging is one of those things that we hear about a lot. We don't get a tremendous amount of feedback. I will say when we had the paper straws, that was when we heard a lot of feedback. They did not like their paper straws. They were very upset. So I think guests have come to know, they know we're in the Pacific Northwest. We're kind of a Pacific Northwest institution. We've been around for since 1961. They know that we're always going to strive for local, fresh, sustainable. That's always kind of how we sort, how we go forward. So the sustainability piece, I feel like guests know that when they come to Burgerville, they can expect to see things that are going to meet those sustainability aspects. So I guess I would say it's not so much maybe the feedback, because like I said, we don't hear a whole lot of feedback about packaging, but I do know that our restaurants, like our managers and our staff, you'll have somebody come in and they'll ask questions now and again. Not a whole lot as it relates to packaging, but we do hear about. I think it also depends on. There's a lot of things that seem like they trend. There was the story about the turtle with the straw in its nose, and then straws blew up for a while, and everybody wanted to talk about straws. So we do get those guests that come in around that time and they're like, hey, what's Burgerville's straw deal? So there's definitely those things that they seem like the level of feedback frequency happens to increase during those times. Um, but I think all in all, we've I think because of the changes we've made recently over our packaging, we have a new story to tell, especially with it relates to the straws. I was just talking to our team yesterday, and I was really excited about like the dishwasher story from Bo about how you can wash it in the dishwasher up to 99 times, and it's reusable up to a certain extent. I was like, we've really got to find a way to tell guests about this. This is really really cool, because if you can get guests to do treat a single-use disposable, but treat it like a reusable to a certain extent. I mean, that just reduces how much ends up going to waste just that much more. So I think there's, like I said, I think there's a new story to tell. We've done a good job telling a sustainability story with our food, especially. But I think there's a new story to tell with packaging and how we're, again, going to be innovators and differentiate ourselves in that space. Um, so, yeah.
So I found that there's, kind of push marketing and pull marketing, right? And a lot of times that, the guest gifts, as Sarah mentions, we do the same thing. We seek out negative feedback so that we can improve our processes. And I think it's refreshing to hear, and that's why we love partnering with Burgerville, because of that like-mindedness in terms of always trying to constantly improve the process and the guest experiences, right? Um, but what I've found is that for those that have sustainable practices, they companies have been using that as a differentiating factor, saying, "Hey, this is what we do, and so come visit us," rather than waiting for the customer to demand it or for the customer to recognize it. So people have been marketing their sustainability practices, and that's become a trend these days, that started just a few years ago. And so you're starting to see that more and more and more as they win over the customers, especially in the younger demographics.
No, that's so true. And what Sierra was saying earlier, they say, like, if somebody's unhappy, they're going to tell 10 people. And if somebody's really,
Right.
really happy, they might tell 3 people.
Right.
So you're so right. You go with paper straws and you hear it. And, you go with something else, which is great, and nobody talks about it, and it kind of dies down. So that's so interesting to hear. So like picking your mind again on, of course, staying with packaging. If there were 3 things that you would like to change at this stage in whatever you use overall, Sierra, what would those be? And then we'll throw the challenge to Bo on how he would change them. So I'm sure you might have had these private conversations, but let's do that online. What would the 3 products in your packaging be that you think that, as a citizen, as a person who looks at the supply chain, that these I would like to eliminate in the next year, 2 years, and then Bo can say how he's going to replace them.
No pressure, Bo. Um, I would say that our paper cups, we have a polylined paper cup, which I feel like is definitely a big opportunity to get something better. Um, we do a PET plastic cup, which is recyclable, but not everywhere. I would love to see. I mean, really, I guess I would love to see us get out of as much plastic as possible, and really whatever products we have that involve plastic, really try to embrace something else. With that said, though, I mean, Bo and I were just talking about this not too long ago. There's additional considerations. It's not just like, oh well, if I eliminate plastic in my packaging, then I'm gold. I'll use paper instead. Well, there's also considerations for paper, especially like if you use like bamboo or sugar cane. It just seems like I would say I keep going back to, like, we've really got to innovate in that space. We've really I was watching one of your earlier podcasts, and somebody mentioned, like, well, if Coke wanted all their bottles back, they would build a facility to recycle all those bottles. And I was thinking, like, man, that is a good point, because we don't have that infrastructure here in the US. So how can we know we need certain packaging items. I mean, we're not gonna get around it. So how to make the packaging options really have a lesser impact. So I would say, like, yeah, anything plastic definitely is on the radar. Let's try to move away from that as much as possible, um, and be mindful of what other options are out there currently, and what impact those options have as well. So I would say, yeah, there's probably about two or three items on the current packaging portfolio that I would love to that are plastic, very heavy into plastic, that I would love to see those transition out if we can do so responsibly. Like I said, those alternate materials can sometimes be just as damaging. So,
I'm going to push you a little bit here, Sierra.
oh,
So you said beverage. We want both to have clear targets, right? So the first one is the beverage cup, and then you mentioned plastic and a couple of other things. Can you just name two more? And it's exciting for me from a sustainability producer perspective as well, because ultimately we have to understand how a customer or a restaurant is thinking, right? what
yeah,
what is the
absolutely.
your greatest pain point? So what would those two others, please humor us?
Definitely the paper cups. Like I
Yep.
said, they've got a poly liner. Our clear PET cups. Um, we've been fortunate enough that a lot of our wraps now are they're PFA free. They don't have any plastic. They don't have any poly. They're more wax. So there's some
Yep.
grease resistance that can be maintained. Um, I would say like the other things would obviously be like the cutlery. I think Bo's got a dynamite idea with the cutlery, and we would definitely be wanting to talk to him as soon as that becomes available. But definitely cutlery. We've already transitioned away from plastic bags. You won't find a plastic bag at Burgerville. We use paper bags. But then I think maybe the other item would be we've got salad containers that are plastic. So there's some of those items where it's like it's really the packaging that is available out there. Maybe it's good for a product that is going to be eaten right away, or it doesn't need to travel. There's some things where maybe it gets there's moisture, or there's this grease resistance component that's needed. So I think there's a lot of like the function. Like obviously with a salad, the plastic container is really what's worked best because it's being taken off premise. So it kind of holds that moisture better. So that's kind of a one that's what it's out there that's really going to work in a better way. But I think those are probably the few things.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Bo, we have a clear target here. Beverage cups, how would you change those? Salad containers, how would you change those? And then, of course, I think you've got them covered for cutlery, I guess. So those are the three that I hear Sierra talking about. The rest, kind of, she's more or less sorted most out. So how would you go about changing those two in particular?
Well, what I've been seeing is that I think while there's opportunity on the cup side, the clamshells are there's a real big need for that because there's so much in the agricultural markets right now that use plastic clamshells. You get grapes, you get strawberries, you get all sorts of things. Those are all in these plastic clamshells, and so. But what we found as a supplier is I would much prefer to do something really, really well and make sure that our customers are never impacted by supply constraints or anything like that. I mean, think back in COVID days, right? And so we go to great lengths to ensure continuity of supply. And so we want to do a few things really well. We don't want to try to do too many things and not do anything great. And so we're taking a very disciplined approach at how we deploy and develop our products. So uh, initially, cutlery went through a design change. So we're implementing that, pivoted over to straws, now pivoting back. But I think some of the things that we're looking at are the little condiment cups for your salad dressings, your ketchups, and like those are pretty fairly straightforward to do, and we can do those in a sustainable and biodegradable way. The clamshells are, of course, another big item. And one thing that I looked into a few years ago because I was looking at hemp and deploying hemp programs on the islands in Hawaii. Um, I really started looking at plastic bag replacements using hemp products. And so we can get there, but there's just a little bit of ability to scale, and then finding the reliable technology. And so we're almost there. So I have been targeting, um, those to-go plastic bags uh, for restaurants, the condiment cups, the clamshells, and so. But it's baby steps, right? So I think what's next on our agenda um, is more of the condiment cups rather than the drinking cups. It's not saying that it's impossible to do. I was just on a call literally 2 minutes before I jumped on this one with a group of researchers out of a major university, and we're looking at cups right now. So, but we're not there yet. We're still in the development stage. Another thing is that when you have liquids and you have foods that go into these, there's an added level of regulatory requirements associated with it. You want to make sure that whatever is the ingredient in your bioplastics, it does not leach into the foods or does not impact the consumer. And so there's a lot more. It's a lot more complex when you're talking a beverage cup or a condiment cup than it is with a straw or a cutlery. So there's a little bit more to that in getting it, to market. But once it does get to market, then it's safe, and that's a good thing. And it's environmentally friendly, which is another good thing. And it's biodegradable and sustainable, which is all just really good things.
Yeah, I can see the meeting of minds here with Go and Burgerville. You guys both want to do something right. That's kind of clear between the two of you, and I see how you come together, because I also see that Burgerville is such an institution in the West, and it's not gone the same route as a McDonald's or a Burger King, right? Because it's not just gone like boom. It's just maintained
Right.
its quality and that whole ethos that you're going to be sustainable, etc., etc. And I love this idea of serve with love, and that's so beautiful. Just a simple statement, serve with love. But just before we take us towards closure, I would love, Ciara, for you to talk about this idea, because you're talking about not just serving food with love, you're talking about helping people, communities. I heard that little incident of cyclists through drive-throughs. I didn't even know that cyclists couldn't go through drive-throughs. And then our producer Alex, who's an absolute fan of Burgerville, by the way, he's been on my case that we have to have Burgerville. It's such an institution in the West, and he talked so much about it. So would love to hear your thoughts on how that whole ethos of serving with love, and how does it manifest itself?
Yeah, definitely our operating principles are definitely serve with love. I think that really what that really it has individual meanings for everybody, but I think overall it means, if I go into a situation, or if I go into a community, or if I go into a restaurant, what can I do to serve with love and really go above and beyond, especially having a hospitality background. It's I feel like it kind of runs in my DNA, so it's hard to articulate sometimes, but it really is that, like, how can I take initiative and really see the need before the need is known? How can I really, do something unexpected? I think is the other thing too, is a lot of our guests they come into Burgerville and they're really surprised at how maybe a conversation goes or a situation goes. I know we've had a handful of times where a guest will come through the drive-through, they'll get up to the window to pay, and they'll be like, "I don't have my wallet. I'm so sorry." And the manager will be like, "You know what? We've got it this time. It happens." We've had a lot of guests come through that'll, they kind of do that pay it forward where they'll pay for the car behind them. I don't remember what our record was, but it was a lot. It was like 10, 15 cars like that had all paid for the car behind them. So it was it's just that really heartwarming, a sense of community. Our restaurants are not just there to serve food; they're there to connect with their communities. They're there to connect with our suppliers, especially, and connect with each other. You've got a lot of regulars that come into Burgerville, and they'll come and they'll have coffee and breakfast, and it's not. it's maybe not a what you would think would be a traditional restaurant to come into and have coffee and breakfast for an hour, but they'll come in there and they know each other. A lot of our managers will sit down and they'll share a cup of coffee with a guest or something like that, and it really is just like a deeper connection to communities and people and to each other, and to the region is just really going above and beyond. I think it's that meeting again, doing the unexpected, meeting the expectation that the guest really didn't even know that they had. So yeah, I hope that answer kind of gives a an answer to the question.
I still want to learn the cyclist through the driveway story. So what was that?
Well, Portland has a lot of cycling. There's a lot of bike lanes, bike bridges, a lot of bicycling, and I think it's really encouraged because the traffic in Portland is kind of horrible. Um, there's a lot of, I think, roads that were not meant for the volume of cars that are going through there. So a lot of public transportation, bicycling, walking. It's all highly encouraged over there. And really, we didn't want we as part of Serve with Love, which is our mission, we really don't want to have any barriers to guest service. So if you only have a bicycle, you don't own a car, and you're traveling, you're on your way to work or whatever, you're cycling, we don't want you to not feel like you can come through or inconvenience the guest by like, well, I've got to get off my bike and I got to lock it up and go in and order and I have to eat it there. So again, it's just really removing all those barriers to the guest experience, being able to serve the guest, and really have that serve with love show up.
That's so cool. And just taking a cue from on the food side, this is not my domain, but I'm just interested. Is there a trend that is also leading to more sustainable food? You talked about being very conscious of locally sourcing, of free range kind of meat and things like that. But is there a trend that we see overall towards vegetarianism, veganism, and how are you tackling that trend? And that's totally off the subject in the podcast, but it's for more for personal interest on
Sure.
how a chain like Burgerville that is so conscious thinks about this trend and adapts to that trend as well.
Sure. So I would say probably around 2018, 2019, we introduced a vegan product for shakes. And really, I think Burgerville has always tried to, again, kind of that serve with love. We want people to be able to come to Burgerville and eat, whether that's, I can't have dairy or I can't have gluten or I need something vegan or I'm a flexitarian. We really want, if you want to come to Burgerville to eat, we want to be able to serve you. So it really is that it's I don't think, yes, we do look at trends. We're always interested in demographics and market trends, especially in the food world. There's always a trend. We try to stay on top of all that. We try to get out into the local communities and as well. We love farmers markets because usually that's where we find some of the coolest stuff that's new to market. But it really is just it's not so much about following a trend. We know we're Burgerville. Burgers are where we want to be, but we also want that person that wants chicken or that person that wants a veggie burger. We want them to be able to come and enjoy with us. So we've got gluten free products. We've got you can come and get a completely plant based meal. If you're dairy free, we've got we partnered with Cosmic Bliss out in Eugene for plant-based soft serve. So it's really exciting because I am a dairy-free person myself, and it was my first time having a milkshake back in 2019 when we introduced that product. It was so exciting. And it really is exciting for our guests. Again, going back to that serve with love, it's exciting for our guests. We actually had a lot of people write in and say, like, my child is, gluten free or they're dairy free. They've never been able to have a milkshake, and this was their first time. So it really was. It is a meal, but you don't really understand the impact of that meal for the person eating it, for the person that provided the product, for the person that made the product. It really is impactful throughout the entire experience. So yeah.
No, that's
You know,
wonderful.
my
And sorry, go ahead,
my
please.
daughter and, yeah, one of my daughters and my wife are vegetarian, and So they told me, hey, when you're on this podcast, you have to advocate for bringing back the Adzuki bean burger back into the. And so, um, but anyway, they just love that, and they would go there specifically for that. But what what we do is we talk about intention and intentionality, and
Right.
so, and it's the same philosophy. If we do good things for the community, if we do good things for the earth, then good things will happen, and that positive intentionality will grow and manifest it in many different ways. And so, I've been fortunate enough to literally travel around the world talking about sustainability and economic practices in this space, right? And we're starting to influence policy at a global level. I'm going to Brussels to meet with EU parliamentarians on sustainability and other practices and policies, right? So we're talking about this, and the more that people do, even if it's in just small little increments, even if it's impacting and
Yeah.
positively influencing just one person at a time, that does really big things, over the course of time. And so we try to do our part, and we're hoping that other people will join us in this crusade.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely, and just taking a cue from Bo Sierra, it was from a selfish perspective. I would also love that Azuki bean burger because I'm a vegan, and I avoid, of course, dairy and gluten. So I have been informed that I need to go to Burgerville because you do have options. So I
Yes.
am coming for sure. But I think that Azuki bean burger sounds amazing. I've never heard of that, so I'm glad that you brought that up, Bo. Taking our conversation towards the end, uh, the second to last question that I normally ask, and it's great to hear your perspectives because you're both so keen on doing it right. It's very clear through the conversation. So Burgerville, 39 locations, 1,400 people is what I have on my data. It may be more than that. Uh, but how do you see in the next 5 years, say if you take a 5 year horizon, how do you see growth? Where does Burgerville want to be? And both for you, looking at supplying interesting products, how would you see that this is the scale I would like to reach in the next 5 years? So Sierra, you take it on and we'll move to Bo.
Well, I just first, I'll give you both a little sneak peek that we are working on a veggie burger proprietary recipe right now, so that will be coming soon. I don't have a specific timeline for it, but definitely coming soon. And you're not the only ones. We hear a lot of folks want that particular item back on the menu. It was really good. So I think, yeah, for Burgerville for the next 5 years, we have a lot of growth planned. We definitely, I think we'll stay in the Pacific Northwest. That's where the heart is. I think we want to expand farther into Oregon, farther into Washington. And what we've really talked about is how to capitalize on those local markets wherever we go, making sure that if we do go into Southern Oregon, that we've got Southern Oregon suppliers, and really taking that local principle and making sure that it stays throughout the entire growth trajectory. And I would say too that it goes through all of our attributes, all of the supply chain is, we'll have to we'll definitely have to look at the local, 75% of the local being within 400 or 500 miles of the headquarters, because that will have to change. But definitely wanting to maintain local and go into communities and can just continue to serve with love, and really it's not just growth for the sake of growth, but it really is growth because there's a lot of pent up demand for Burgerville. We hear from a lot of cities where they're just like, we need a Burgerville here. So it really is. It's beneficial for us to grow, and we grow with our partners as well. Like we've had a lot of conversations about responsibly growing with our partners, making sure that our growth isn't going to negatively impact them. But again, just going into communities where it makes sense, where we know that there's demand for us, and taking our partners with us. There's a lot of economies of scale. But then there's also, maybe if we can't grow with a certain partner, maybe we add on new partners and just make that local component that much better.
Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah. So, over the course of the next 5 years, like I mentioned earlier, with 500 million straws used and thrown away in landfills every day, 100 million cutlery used and thrown away in landfill, we want to try to chip away. And that's just in the US alone, by the way. Um, we want to chip away at that and replace as much of that petroleum based plastic with bioplastics and alternative plastics as possible. But what we also want to do is we're expanding. Everyday Hemp Company has two more divisions in addition to a government division. One is on the grain side, and we're trying to recruit farmers to ship grains and high nutritional meals to Africa. And so we're setting up an African export program right now. We're trying to initially start with 100,000 acres of grain and then expand to 1 million acres just in the US alone. And then we also have a fiber division that not only includes the plastics, but also we're looking at introducing high quality fibers into pulp and paper processes for that packaging. And so we're trying to do that, but at a controlled pace. Ultimately, over the next 5 years, we're looking to um, uh, max out our capacity and then set up regional hubs to where we do localized manufacturing and production throughout the United States. We've been offered the exclusive rights to the Thai market for all of our cutlery. So any plastic cutlery in Thailand would be ours as long as we source locally. And then we're also looking to set up manufacturing and cultivation and like the entire value chain in Europe. And so I presented in front of the Irish Parliament about a year and a half ago talking about sustainable products using hemp. And so we're looking at setting up a manufacturing facility there at some point in time. And then also there's some research going on in Slovenia that we're trying to begin initial conversations with the Slovenian government to set up a regional center of excellence. So we're just trying to go from doing the right thing locally to continuing to do the right thing just in more localities. And we think that we're going to be able to get there.
Wow, that's brilliant. You're all over the map, Bo. That's amazing. Amazing to hear that. I'm glad, Sierra, you pulled Bo into this conversation. So this has been such a learning kind of interaction for me. And that takes me to my final question, which is what does good garbage mean to you? Let's start with you this time, Bo, and then move to Sierra as the closing remark from Sierra.
Well, good garbage would mean no garbage, kind of in line with what you had mentioned earlier. But what the way that we view these things is that if there are things that need to be thrown away, or if there are single use, that as they are recycled into back into the ecosystem, either through a regenerative process or like, that there's as little harm done to the environment as possible. And in many ways, through carbon sequestration, through regenerative practices, you can have a positive impact on the environment, and that's really where we want to go. So, good garbage is a positive thing.
I read the question and I was thinking about it quite a lot. I was like, I it's an interesting question. I would have to agree. I mean, there's not really any good garbage. The good garbage would be the least amount of garbage. But I would say too, from kind of my own personal experience, when I'm, kind of sorting through the things that I'm disposing of, it's just really that intentionality of, like, why do I have this? Can I reuse it? Can I put this in my compost? Can I recycle it? Just really, I think good garbage maybe is intentional garbage, more thoughtful garbage. I think it's maybe too easy for folks to just say, "Oh, I've got this, and I don't know what to do with it, so I'm just going to put it in my trash can." But really making it so that it could be reused or it could be repurposed, recycled into something else, but really having garbage be more, having it be less abundant, having it be more intentional and thoughtful. And really, I guess I can't say it enough, but just having a right amount of product. I think there's a degree of overabundance where, you know, there's, like we've talked about economies of scale. There's, if I run this many units, I achieve a price efficiency or a cost efficiency, operational efficiency. But it really is like having just what we need. Having garbage actually be, um, have it, I don't want to say make sense, but have it be within reason, because it's not because we're having overabundance, but really having it be, again, going back to our mission of, serving with love, making sure that we're not taking away from, just continuously taking away from communities or the land, but making sure that we're being really thoughtful and intentional about what we do take and what we do put back. So, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's been so lovely to hear your views. And I think what's been really refreshing for me is the intentionality you both come with, and of course, as Burgerville and Bo, as a person and the company that you're running, it's just deeply intentional. And the other thing which has been very influencing for me, because, I always kind of start thinking in terms of scale. But you guys have brought home this idea that whatever you do, do it well. Even if it is
Right.
that one store, just get it right. And I loved your kind of in a way resistance, in a way that don't just get into everything, get one thing right and then move. So this has just been great learning for me from both of you. Thank you so much for taking this time, because it's just been a great idea where there is a restaurant chain and there is a supplier together, because that just makes such a wonderful conversation from both sides of the table. So thank you both for taking the time to be on the show. We wish you all the very best. The world needs more and more people like you. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for being on the show again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.